So anyway, thank you guys for coming out. We appreciate it. This is our first in a series that we have planned. We will gradually be going through all of the different steps that we're going to be talking about tonight at greater length each month. But tonight's presentation is really an overview of how the whole process works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Okay. And so
this
is Lori.
So I'm a realtor, and I own a team of real estate agents. There are 8 of us, including myself. We help first-time home buyers, sellers, a lot of investors, and I've been in the business since the end of 2017. Joanne and I teamed up starting just a couple of years ago because what we discovered is that there are so many myths about what you do and how to buy a house. And that so many of our clients had all the same questions.
Same questions over and over and over again.
And you just don't know what you don't know, right? And it can be really overwhelming and kind of scary to go into it without having some idea where you're going.
So we're here to dispel some of those myths and, give you an opportunity to ask whatever questions you may have because, again, we want you to be informed consumers. This is one of the biggest purchases you will ever make in your life. It may not be the only time you make it, but the first time can be kind of scary and daunting, and so we want to help you guys.
First time you buy, first time you sell, both of them are kind of scary.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm Joanne Worobec, and I am a loan officer. This is where I work. I do have kind of a varied background, but I've always loved real estate and finance, and so this is kind of where I ended up, and I love what I do. And really the reason why is because I love helping people with their money, and I love helping people win and succeed. So, okay. And then this is our intro to home buying. So this is the wheel we're going to be talking about. And so we're going to be touching on each of these little spokes, kind of starting right here. So initially we'll be meeting with
and even though it's kind of interesting because even this graphic is incorrect, quite honestly, because it says that the first person you should talk to is me, and that's not true. First person you should talk to is her. Because until you know where you're positioned financially, we don't want to be out looking at houses, right? Because you don't know yet how much you could spend or what any of that means or what the payments are. So the gist of that is everybody thinks you start with a realtor. You don't. You start by getting your finances in order so that you are really comfortable with where this purchase is going to be financially for you.
You don't want to waste anybody's time. Most of all yours, right? You want to know what you can afford so that you're shopping in the price point that you can shop in and that you can make offers when you find that home. And you don't want to waste the agent's time nor the seller's time, and so, it really is the first step.
Right.
Okay.
So once you get that settled with Joanne, and then she gives you a nice shiny pretty pre-approval letter, right? Because that's something that then we use when we're writing an offer. Then while you're working on that with her, that's when you start talking to an agent and talking about exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? What area of town do you want to live in? How do you picture yourself living in this house? How big of a house do you need? Do you need a fence? Do you not need a fence? All of those things so that your agent can start building a picture to help find that home, right? And then I'll input all of that information into the computer and then set up a search for you so that every day you'll get an email of any new properties that have come to the market that fit those parameters that we've talked about. Okay, and so some will be close. What I really recommend is that you look at a variety of things, because what I find with a lot of my clients is that what they think they want when they start turns out to be very different. Right, Sam? He was that client. So we looked at a lot of different houses when I sold him his, and he ended up in something completely different than what he thought that he first wanted.
Danny's shaking her head like she knows this story.
Yeah, right? Because you just don't know until you're in the house walking around and you can feel it and you can feel the flow of it. And you have to work with an agent who's really going to be in tune with what you want and is also patient to work through that process with you. So don't be afraid to need to see a lot of houses before you make a decision, because as Joanne said, hey, come on in. As Joanne said, this is probably the biggest purchase that you're gonna make, right? So a good agent wants to make sure that that's exactly what you're getting is what's good for you.
Yep. So here's our wheel. We're gonna go into these a little bit more in depth, so I'm gonna just go ahead and, as we talked about, the first step is really getting pre-approved. Just so that you don't waste your time, you don't waste anybody else's time, you know what you can afford and what it'll look like, and that you're comfortable with the payment too. Just because you get pre-approved at the max value doesn't mean that that's what you really want to spend per month, on your monthly mortgage payment. So just be aware of where what will work for you. Okay.
Yeah, and it's really important to do that step as well before we're really committed to a house, because I don't know, have y'all heard that it's kind of a busy market, right? Kind of a seller's market still. So if we see the house,
Don't mind if I just start crying.
oh,
I'm like right in the thick of it.
oh, right? So it's not unusual right now. If we see the house, we need to write an offer like now, right? Sometimes I've been known to write offers sitting in Schnucks parking lot, on my computer, hotspotted to my phone, so that I can get that offer in to meet a deadline. And it really has to include that pre-approval letter, because any seller is going to want to see that you actually are qualified to buy the house before they select that offer.
So another thing I kind of want to touch on this. So pre-qualification is not pre-approval. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the differences, but pre-qualification is basically you've told me verbally kind of your situation, but I haven't verified it with any documents. And so to get fully pre-approved, I am checking your assets, I am checking your credit, your income, and I am actually running it through preliminary underwriting findings so that I know when you go to make that offer, you will not come across obstacles during the process. I want to get you to closing without any kind of issues. I want to avoid any kind of legal issues or any kind of like hot spots that gets, people anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? So what I will be asking for first, I go through a series of questions. They're not that hard. We just go through them, and then I ask for a few verifying documents. Usually it's 2 months, most recent checking and asset statements. Like I said, I want to know that you're working, right? So your income, I want to see that it's getting deposited.
And please stay working during the process?
Yes.
Until
Yes,
closing.
please.
Then do whatever you want.
Yes. And then I want to see that you have the down payment funds. I want to see that you are who you say you are. So I'm going to look for your ID. I am going to look for pay stubs, and then last 2 years W-2s, because that will also be part of the income verification process. But once I have those, generally I can get you pre-approved sometimes in less than an hour. So
Yeah, she's been really quick. And sometimes that's also, because she's able to do some of that so fast, it's also been very helpful for some of my clients where maybe she's given me a pre-approval letter for, say, $300,000. And we're looking at a house that's, $230,000. I really want to provide a pre-approval letter that says you're pre-approved for $240,000. I don't want to give the seller that extra ammunition to know that you have room to move, right? That's part of what I do as an agent, is handle negotiations. So what Joanne has in the past, sometimes I'll call her or text her and say, hey, can you give me an updated pre-approval for this dollar amount? And then boom, there it goes.
Shoot right over. So, okay. So next, after you get pre-approved, you choose a realtor.
Right. So realtors, just so you know, typically buyers don't pay commissions to realtors. Okay. The way that the commission process flows is that the seller agrees in a listing agreement to pay a certain percentage of the sale of the price as commission. And then the listing agent agrees to share some of that with the buyer's agent. And all of that is published so that only agents can see it, the public can't see it. But in the MLS, agents know.
So I've been doing real estate in Texas for the last 4 years, and everybody does 3%. Why do we do 2.7 here?
Honestly, let me clarify. There is no standard. So
Okay.
legally, we can't
Right.
say there's a standard.
Right.
You will oftentimes see 2.7, sometimes 2.5. I've seen sometimes 3. And because of, and this is a much bigger conversation for later,
Okay.
because of legislation that's happening nationally, I'm expecting to see some big changes to that will impact buyers, and will kind of turn the tables so that they may only be offering a buyer's agent 1% or a flat fee or nothing, and the buyer will be expected to pay that commission through the closing. So that's because of some lawsuits that have been going on over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. So make sure, so that's how we get paid. Then you,
Sorry.
just so you know, I know, no, that's okay.
Well,
Questions?
it's easier to get the commissions out of the profit of the sale of the home than it is for a buyer to come in with them. They're already scrapping together
Right.
the down payment. So, it's easier for all of the payments for agent
Yeah.
commissions to come out of the profit of the sale.
It is, and because we've done that forever, appraisals and values assume that commission in there. So if and when that changes, it's going to change a lot of other things in our world, right? But you want to make sure when you're selecting an agent, you want to make sure that they really understand you and what you're looking for. You want to make sure that they're going to communicate with you the way that you want to be communicated with, right? Maybe you like text. Maybe you like, I have some clients that we're all messenger, I have other clients that want to talk on the phone. So make sure you work with somebody who's a really good match for you, because you're going to develop a really, really close relationship for a short period of time, right?
Yep. Yeah. Other things too I would just mention is you really want an agent who also can show you things that you wouldn't normally see. So again, you're most likely going to be new to the process, maybe you don't know homes, whatever, but they need to be able to point out structural things that maybe you're not going to be aware of.
Yeah, I forget about that part. So prior to real estate, I was in big box home improvement and construction for a number of years. And I work with a lot of investors now and help advise them on what to do on a flip on a home. But so being able to walk in and to be able to recognize whether the water heater has an expansion tank on it, to look up and see if work was done permitted. That's a big issue that we're running into right now, is that people have been remodeling homes and not getting permits, and then in the occupancy inspection period, the county or whatever governing authority comes in and says, whoa, you didn't get permits, you got to rip all this out and start all over again. So working with someone who not only knows you, but who understands the product itself.
Yep.
And the house, and what is a big deal and what might not be, or what's workable, right?
Okay. So once you're pre-approved, once you find a realtor, now it's time to actually do the shopping. And this is kind of the fun part, you would think. Danny shakes her head.
It's stressful, isn't it?
Stressful.
It is.
It's so stressful.
It really is, particularly in this market. So most people who are thinking about buying a house know that over the last couple of years, particularly last summer, pre-July, it was a feeding frenzy, right? It was, and we had a little bit quieter winter, and I'm sorry to say, the frenzy's back. If it's a desirable home in a desirable area, one of my agents had 2 listings down in High Ridge, probably haven't been updated in 15 years, and she had 55 showings in 3 days.
Wow.
And went under contract, immediately over list. So again, when you're selecting an agent, you need to make sure that that agent has a good understanding of how to negotiate and how to present you and your offer in the best way that protects you and also is going to get you the deal.
Yeah.
So you'll hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, we're just going to waive appraisal, right? We're going to waive inspections. No. You need to know, you need to still retain the right to have the home inspected. You may say in the offer, okay, I'm not going to ask for any repairs under $5,000 per repair, right? However, you need to have it inspected by a qualified professional. I'm good, I cannot see inside a sewer lateral, and I don't climb on a roof. And those are both very expensive things if they're not right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to shopping for a home.
Yeah.
Enjoy this part. Even though we just kind of scared you, it actually is kind of the
Yeah.
fun part because you get to see what you want, what's out there. You get to look through all kinds of different homes. You
And
know.
the way it'll typically work is you'll shop through those emails and then you'll send your agent a message or a text or a call them or whatever and say, hey, I really like this one, when can we see it? And then they'll schedule a showing appointment. You'll meet out at the property. Your agent will bring you some more information about that property. And one of the things you want to make sure that your agent is always sharing with you and cognizant of is what are the property taxes in that
Yes.
area.
Yeah.
Because, the property taxes in Baldwin are very different than in Dogtown in the city, right? And your payment is very much dependent on those taxes.
And I'm always happy to do an analysis on any kind of properties that you may find, and specifically for that reason, because the taxes can be vastly different. I like to add those kinds of things in. Also, homeowners association, if there's a homeowners association, I need to know the dues so that I can kind of
Right.
show you what it'll look like with that too.
So then we schedule the showing, we go in and we walk the property. Sometimes there are other showings happening at the same time, sometimes not. I will tell you, always assume that you are always on camera. Everybody's got cameras in their houses. So just assume that somebody's listening and somebody's watching. So don't walk in and go, oh my God, this is so great, I would pay so much more for this house. Or, oh, I can't believe they put that ugly wallpaper up there.
Yeah.
We can talk about those things just outside on the front lawn,
Yeah.
not in the house.
You don't want to upset the seller
Yeah.
at all, because that may not
Or
work for you.
give them
Or
any
give them
ammunition for negotiations.
Yes. Okay. So you found the home, and now you want to make an offer on it, and you're going to negotiate the terms. So this is really where
This is
the
my
agent
world,
comes in.
right?
Yeah.
So we will determine based on, I'll do a comparison analysis of other properties that have sold in that area that are similar. We'll determine what is a fair offer and a fair price. There are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind, right? So at the end of the day, if there's a loan, there's an appraiser. So if you can offer $100,000 over, right? But if it's not going to appraise, then we're going to be negotiating that at the back end. So I always stay on top of what the appraisers are looking at and how they're looking at properties, so that we can make sure to hit the right number. And then that's where we also talk about different contingencies and inspections. And as we said earlier, tonight's seminar is really just a general overview. Then we're planning every month to do a deeper dive into each one of these segments. Now, of course, we're always available outside of here for,
For any kind of questions.
right, for any kind of questions or, like, what the heck's up with commission?
Okay. So next, you're now under contract. So you've offered, you negotiated, you are now under contract. First thing that happens is I get the contract. I then put all the relevant information into your loan, okay, into your loan file, and then I will send out disclosures. And so with disclosures, when you get disclosures, there's a loan estimate in there so you can see the actual breakdown of what the loan is going to look like as you start. They are not an obligation to borrow, it's not an obligation to lend, it is a starting point for the process. You can have some edits throughout the process. Eventually you'll want everything to like button up and not have edits, but we do, there's a little room for movement in the beginning. And from there, after the mortgage application, after you sign the disclosures, we'll see if we need any updated paperwork, and we will get the appraisal ordered. So that's the next step of the process. And then we go into home inspections.
Home inspection, right. So there's a contingency period in the contract of a certain number of days that you as the buyer can hire a qualified home inspector to top to bottom inspect the home. Typically that is one of the few things that you pay for during the process. Okay, so you'll credit card or whatever to that home inspector. And we both have multiple different home inspection companies that we can recommend. The things that they'll look at will be like a general home inspection, checking on the insulation, and they'll run all the faucets and run all the toilets. But then there is often a sewer lateral inspection where they actually cable and camera down the sewer lateral, make sure there's no obstructions or any breaks. And then another separate one is also a gas mechanical. So if there are gas appliances, and there are lots of those here in Missouri, you'll want that inspection as well, where they really do a deeper dive into the furnace, the water heater, and any of those gas appliances. So then they do their inspection and they produce a report. And it looks really incredibly scary, right? Because most
Generally
houses,
very thick.
yeah, an average is probably 40 to 45 pages.
Mhm.
Okay, it includes tons of pictures. They look at absolutely everything. Typically in the first section are the things that are more concerning, or things that they know that we as agents typically negotiate, right? But we'll sit down and go over everything in that report and what's concerning. And my first question will always be, so based on this report, is there anything about the condition of the house that, if it is not addressed, either financially or fixed, that makes you no longer want to buy this house? Because that's our first priority list. And then we'll work down those priorities. So, and then I start negotiating with the seller. And there are multiple different options there. We can either require that they have things repaired by qualified professional contractors, and we collect all of the warranties and all of that information. Or we can request a closing cost concession,
Seller concession.
right? Depending on your loan, there are different amounts that we can utilize for that. And we'll go over all of that when we're going to be doing one of these classes that's just going to be all about loan options, right? Because it's a big topic. So we'll negotiate whatever's going to work best for you over the course of the next 5 to 10 days. And then once we're done with that, then we move on to the rest of it. And I help manage making sure that those repairs actually get done, and that we collect lien waivers and receipts and all of that.
Purchase price reductions, that's another
Mhm.
tactic that can.
Yes.
And then one inspection you didn't touch on was
Mhm.
termite inspection.
Oh, yes, yeah, termite inspection.
So that's generally a separate one. but
Right.
Yes, that's another one. And so what I wanted to touch on is home inspections are not appraisals.
Mm-mm.
So inspection of the home is looking at safety features, like age of appliances, all kinds of things. An appraisal is only to determine the value of the home as it compares in the market. And so they are two different things. Home inspection is something you're gonna be living with.
Mhm.
The appraisal is just for us to determine how much money to loan you. So we want to know that the home hits the value that you're actually, your contract is for, right? So what you're purchasing the home for. That number will change eventually because homes appreciate. So it is just a point in time, and it's what we use to loan you the money. And what we do is we base it on the appraised value or the purchase price, whichever is lower, and that's what we are lending you the money on. Okay, so they are two completely different things, used for two different purposes. In the way of an appraisal, my company will actually do the appraisal, we will cover the cost of it, and we will roll it in at the end if it gets to closing. If it doesn't get to closing, you don't owe us anything. Some, companies do that, some companies don't.
Yeah, many lenders require payment for the appraisal when the appraisal is done, just like with the home inspections. So when you're talking to different lenders, those are some of the things that you're going to want to ask about is what do you as a buyer, what are you expected to pay for during the process as opposed to at closing?
Yep. Okay. So next, this is part of the loan where everything gets verified. So we've had the inspection, we've had the appraisal, you've already signed disclosures. Now we're getting thrown into processing underwriting. So we have processing they're going to do verification of employment, they're going to request title work, they're going to be looking at all your pay, like they're going to be doing a fine tooth comb, dotting every I, crossing every T, so that the loan is absolutely perfect by the end. This is where sometimes people may or may not get annoyed. I try and make
Yeah.
it so that you're not going to get annoyed because I like to have all my ducks in a row ahead of time. But sometimes we have, like the underwriter may
yeah.
ask for some documentation that's kind of off the wall. I don't see that happen very often, but
No, not very
Every-
often. I think the most common that I probably see is gifts, right? So
Mhm.
if you have a family member who's gonna help contribute to your down payment, the underwriter is gonna need to see the tracking of that money, and they will ask for that family member's bank records.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have seen family members get mad because they're like, I'm not gonna give them my bank records. Well, then we can't get the house,
Yeah.
So there are some things that will come up. And she mentioned title. So what that means, there's a third-party company called the title company. They're the ones that are actually going to handle the transfer of the deed and the transfer of the money. One of the other key things that they provide for buyers specifically is title insurance. So they do a deep research of the property to make sure, you probably heard, needs to have a clean title, right? So there can't be like Uncle Herman somewhere who legally has a right to the property, but nobody knows it. Or the survey comes up and there's a fence encroaching 6 feet into somebody's yard. We just dealt with this with a client and ended up having to have, we had 2 different survey companies that disagreed. Our survey company was right and won, and so the neighbor's survey company had to pay to have the fence moved, right? Those are all things that come up through the titling process, and that again, your agent helps you manage and determine.
navigate it.
Right.
So, one thing we failed to mention too, when you actually are under contract, right, from the beginning and when you're signing e-disclosures, you will then also deposit earnest money with the title company. Usually it's like 1%, maybe it's.
Yeah, it could be 1,000, could be
negotiated.
2,000.
But you will deposit, and that will then open escrow. So you will then be under contract and everything
Yeah,
will.
and that money
set
is held by the title company, that's an independent third party, and that money either applies to your side of the purchase when you close, or if the deal falls apart, both sides mutually agree based on the contract itself where that money is gonna go. So the title company doesn't release it without agreement from both sides or a court order if something goes to court.
Yep.
And
Okay.
you don't have to depending on the title company you're working with, but the ones I work with, you don't have to drive over there and drop off a check. Like, I can send you a link and you can do it electronically.
Yeah. A couple other things, you're gonna lock your rate while your loan is being processed. And then eventually, when we get closer to close, we're going to actually send a preliminary closing disclosure, otherwise known as a CD. And this will give you pretty good estimates of what your loan is going to look like at the time of closing. There will still then be some reconciliation between title company and the closing department for your final CD, which will have the very final numbers. So we have to issue the preliminary closing disclosure no less than 3 business days before you close.
Right.
Just so you're aware. Okay.
Yeah, so I have seen that happen where I've had to extend closing because a lender, obviously not Joanne, but a lender was not able to get that CD out in enough time for us to meet that closing date. And the one thing that we don't ever want to have happen is for you to be parked out front with your moving truck and not able to get in your property.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So now preliminary closing disclosure has been sent out. We're now at the closing table. So as your loan officer, I'll review the closing docs for the purchase. This will be your final closing disclosure right before close. You'll get a cashier's check or a money order, or you will wire transfer your funds to the title company. And basically we're gonna finish up the close. The closing will take place at the title company, or you may have a mobile notary come to you and sign the documents. Once the title company has received the funds and has transferred the funds then to the seller's title company, and everything is in its rightful place, then you will be given the keys
Yeah,
and
then
you will
own,
take
then you
possession.
own the property. So even though you've signed your closing documents, you can't actually enter the property typically for a few hours after that. Now, we also want to always make sure, because this amount of money moves by wires, right? Moves through bank wires. So, and there's a cutoff, typically between 4 and 4:30, there's a cutoff after which money's not going to move. So we try to close earlier in the day so that we don't get close to that deadline and then you can't get into it till the next day, right? So Missouri is one of the states where there are some documents that have to be wet signed still. There are some, I don't know if Texas, if you can do everything online or not. There are other states where you could literally sign everything online, but here there are some documents that have to be witnessed by a notary. So you'll go to the title company, your loan, she'll be there, I'll be there in case you have any questions,
Mhm.
and then you'll get hand cramps from signing tons and tons of documents.
Yes. Okay, and then we're kind of done with today's overview. We do have some online tools and resources. We mentioned in your packet, there's a QR code up in the top right of one of the
Mhm.
pages. That will take you to the online brochure for,
For our first-time home buyer
Yes,
guide. There
our
is a
guide.
paper copy of the guide in your books as well, because some people like paper, some people like digital.
Mhm.
A couple of other things that we put in there are some tips to help make the buying process as stress-free as possible.
Mhm.
And then a real estate terminology guide, because we have a language all our own.
All our own.
So when we start talking about,
CDs,
title and
LEs.
escrow and all those things, it can be
Yeah.
very overwhelming if you don't know what the heck anybody's talking about.
Mhm.
So that kind of helps give you some ideas of what we'll be working on and dealing with. Now, we've planned this event as a series so that once a month we'll be doing a deeper dive into all of these areas. There'll be one that's just about funding and finances, because there's so many different options, right? Do you want a move-in ready house, or do you want something that you're gonna rehab, right? Are you gonna put sweat equity? There are loans to cover some of those different things.
We were just talking about those loans today.
Were you talking about
Yeah.
rehab loans? I love rehab loans.
Yeah.
Because it's a loan within, you can get a mortgage, get a loan for both the purchase price and the rehab. So it does allow, in markets like this, where we have one beautiful move-in ready house over here with a feeding frenzy on it, right? And then there's one down the street that's not as active because it's still dated in the 1980s. That we have processes and loans that will help you go into that one and make it what you want it to be and update it all under the umbrella of one loan.
Yep.